let's go ahead and put up the cost estimates just so we can give you some of the more, the details in terms of the numbers here. So one of the estimates found that this could cost $300 billion. This is actually before they added in the $20,000 of forgiveness, so they're updating this to see. One thing so on the one hand, it could be more than this. On the other hand, it's also important to keep in mind that a lot of this debt was never going to get paid off.
Yes.
A lot of, borrowers, I think it's like 1 out of 5 borrowers was already in default. You have 90% of borrowers right now who say they are not prepared for student debt payments to restart. So, the reality of the situation is, especially with that Obama-era program that limits the amount that you have to pay in, a bulk of this debt was probably never going to be paid, ultimately.
This is all fake. And that's why I also get frustrated by, who's going to pay? Listen, this is all BS. It's a lot like Social Security. If you're my age and you pay Social Security, good luck trying to collect when you're 65. I think we all know this is not going to happen. Probably going to take a haircut of like 2/3. This is also probably the exact same thing. So in terms of the collective future and the actual numbers, I don't disagree with
I see people trying to make it like you're going to directly pay for it right now.
That's not how the government works. I'm always going to argue that type of idiocy.
Yeah.
Politically, though, not a terrible point for the Republicans to hammer home. So I really just think that it comes down to, and this is also, by the way, my problem with free community college. I don't think most of these people deserve jobs at these colleges. I think it's all fake. I think they're full of it. I mean, I've been reading very interestingly in my monologue about the number of diversity, equity, and inclusion staffers. They're getting paid full salaries, all based on tuition bloat, which is funded by a lot of these student loans. I mean, I think the fact is that you have to burn the system basically to the ground, all the way to 1992 era of when this was actually affordable, accessible. That's when around 20-something% of the U.S. population was going to college. I think that's, frankly, probably about right.
Well, what happened in part is that these colleges became like businesses.
They are. Look at LSU. They have a lazy river going through their campus. I'm sorry, that's insane that
insane.
The taxpayers are paying for this.
Well, and that is the thing is they became like businesses. There was an effort starting in California with Reagan, actually, to really strip a lot of the state funding.
Yep.
So then they had to go out into the market and attract and market towards students. And guess which students they want to attract? They want to attract wealthy students who can donate and who can, fill up their coffers. And so they created all of these, and there's administrative bloat, but it's also all these luxury amenities, the lazy river,
it's all this
the
fake
fitness palace,
services.
all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's, it ultimately part of that is that the state took a step back from having a direct interest. And so there was no incentive to keep costs under control. When California universities, which were, and still are some of the best in the nation, when their funding was significantly stripped, then that totally changed the economic model and landscape. So I completely agree that's a problem. I just don't think that the fact that you're not solving every problem right now isn't a reason to do what we can do at this point in time and give people a little bit of relief.
I hear what you're saying.
Let's go ahead and go to this next piece about how they are justifying this in terms of the sort of legal backing. It's interesting because, Saagar, and maybe you looked into this more, it seems like there are two potential justifications for this. So the memo they put out cites a post-9/11 law that allows for debt cancellation in connection with a war or other military operation or national emergency. They're saying the COVID pandemic is that emergency that justifies the use of this. It's called the HEROES Act of 2003. It fairly directly, it says it authorizes the secretary to, quote, waive or modify any statutory or regulatory provision applicable to the student financial assistance programs if the secretary deems such waivers or modifications necessary to ensure at least one of several enumerated purposes, including that borrowers are not placed in a worse position financially because of a national emergency. There's also, presidents, including Biden, including Trump, including Obama, for a long time have used this Education Act legal justification to give selective student loan debt relief, like the public servant program that I was talking about before, service members. I think there was a provision from Biden this year, if memory serves correctly, specifically targeted disabled service members. So it's been used in the past to grant debt relief, just not in quite as wide scale of a fashion.
It's really weird that they chose to go with the HEROES Act because there's actually a provision under Obamacare which is probably more legally justifiable and sound. So Obamacare had a federal student loan takeover as part of its actual pay for in terms of how they were going to make it go forward. And there are provisions within Obamacare that actually allow the president to go and to cancel debt, or at least to take and federalize the program in a much more direct manner. So I think it's incredibly odd that they went with COVID as the reason to do so. And actually, from what I understand, this could face a real problem at the Supreme Court if it goes up there. Let's go and put this up there on the screen. This isn't just from here. I've asked around in the legal community, and apparently this is pretty sound, which is that the Supreme Court may actually reject it because, and this can look at it under the same scrutiny of which we'll recall the CDC eviction moratorium. You remember that Kavanaugh was like, hey, CDC, you can't just use COVID as a reason in order to extend this. You need to go and enact this program through Congress. I'm going to allow this to go on for, I think it was like 60 days or something like that. Well, eventually what happened is the 60 days expired. Congress did not ultimately pass it until the Supreme Court came through and actually struck it down, and there was some sort of détente that was reached. This actually could have the same problem. And I think that's also part of the problem with this, with the COVID justification, which is that at the same time, I mean, here's the thing. They're ending other programs like Title 42 down at the border, saying, oh, well, actually, we're going to end this even because the COVID pandemic is slowing down, but we're also going to declare a public health emergency and use it to cancel student debt. Look, I understand that people who are recipients of this policy don't care whatsoever. But I'm just saying, you know, we have found out the hard way in past that using novel interpretations of the law, while it can be cool, does not necessarily stand up. And so this could very, very certainly go all the way up to the Supreme Court. I think it's really strange that they went this way and not with the Obamacare. Obamacare gives them a much more direct statute in order to do this. They probably did it because this is a faster way and less administrative in order to go about.
Oh, really?
But here's the thing. I mean, from what I understand, they've been looking at this for a year. Right. So like, why didn't you just use the better legal justification?
I had really sort of given up on, Biden promised this very directly on the campaign trail.
Yes,
I mean, this
I think
is one
he
of
said
the
it
things
to Bernie Sanders
he repeatedly, you know, talked about. At least he would say at least $10,000 in student debt relief, and so I think that's how ultimately progressives were able to sort of shame him into really taking action here, because obviously he was a little bit like this. You know, this isn't a neoliberal kind of thing to do. Like direct debt relief, looking at something and saying, okay, the problem is people have too much debt. We're just going to cancel some of that debt is a very not neoliberal thing to do. The typical neoliberal approach would be like, let's have a tax credit, let's have an incentive, let's have a program.
Yes.
So in that way, even though, again, I would like to see more, it is a real sign, again, of a sort of break with the neoliberal order, which is remarkable given that Biden was not just like a participant in, but a real architect of that neoliberal order throughout his career, and also, you know, certainly during the Obama administration. But in terms of the legal justification, listen, I'm going to let other people who are more versed in this do the deep analysis. All I can say is that presidents have routinely use the authority that they have to grant student loan debt relief. Yes, it has not been this broad and this sweeping, but most of the analysis that I've read says that this is on relatively firm legal footing. Then again, it's not like the Supreme Court really is like honestly parsing through the law and precedent and whatever. They're trying to come up with a justification for whatever they ideologically want to do. So I don't want to bet on that, but I'm very much in favor ultimately of the president doing things that are good and popular. And if they get challenged in court and the court wants to say, we're going to take this away, then okay, we'll go down that road. But so ultimately we'll see what happens here. The last thing that I wanted to note that I thought was interesting in terms of the sort of bigger conversation, Ryan Cooper had a good piece that said, let's go ahead and put this up on the screen, this last article, Joe Biden's student debt forgiveness is a good start, which is kind of how I think about it too. He points out, and this is crazy, and this goes to the stupidity of the neoliberal approach to doing things. The federal government already spends about 15% more on all of its various indirect higher education subsidies than the sum total of all tuition at public colleges and universities. So the money is already there. So It's just a way of saying, like, the way we're doing this right now, writ large, is really stupid. It's really not cost effective, and there is definitely a lot more to be done. I think also before we move on, we should probably address the inflation debate on this.
Yeah, actually, that's important.
Because, yeah, this is I think this is one of the more salient critiques of taking this move right now. You know, Larry Summers and Jason Furman, former Obama economists, are very aggressively saying, like, this is going to be inflationary. This is the wrong thing to do at the wrong time. The thing that, so there's two problems I have with that analysis. Number one, people are already not paying their student loan
yes. So that actually,
payments.
It's been inflationary since we paused it in March of 2020.
So it's like, I mean, we're not really changing the baseline right now. People are still not going to be making, you know, those payments until December 31st. But I also, you know, and we've talked about this a lot, I really object to this idea that, number one, inflation is primarily driven by the fact that people got a little more money in their pocket. I don't deny that that had an impact. But the bigger problem is the energy prices skyrocketing. The bigger problem is the supply chains. The bigger problem is corporate price gouging. And so I really object to this almost like sociopathic idea that is ascendant among elite economists and among the Fed, that the only way we can deal with the inflation issue is basically by crushing the working class and forcing a recession and making them feel a lot of pain.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. It's actually a terrible way in order to boost the economy.
Yeah.
If you wanted to boost the economy. As we said,
yeah.
frankly, it's a deflationary move if you make people start paying their payments back in the future. So in a way, we've already had the inflationary move by pausing student debt or student payments for the last 2 years.
True.
It's complicated. More what I would say is I generally have no idea. I mean, will it actually impact consumer spending? There's not really a whole lot of evidence either way that by pausing it that we did boost consumer spending, and that by taking it away and then restarting payments that we won't ultimately see a wash. So I think it's probably 50-50. We'd be better off like doing a hell of a lot more in the oil markets if you really wanted to. Like if you want to solve inflation, we should, you know, or hey, listen, you know, you could end certain sanctions on Russia. That actually would probably have way more. Or we could pressure the Crown Prince in order to, you know, I don't know if people know this, but only a couple of days ago, the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia said that they were going to cut oil production despite promises to Biden. That is going to have like 10x more of a impact than a lot of this will. In general, I think it'll be a wash. That being said, politically, I have no idea. I mean, I do think a lot of people are going to get pissed off by this. And I don't think we should underrate the boomer. I mean, there's a lot of boomer people who, look, I don't agree with their analysis. I guess I understand where they're coming from. They're like, well, when I was in college, you know, I had a janitor's job and swept my way through. Listen, I mean, college costs has ballooned since then. It's just simply not the case. But a lot of these people just don't want to hear the truth, which is that college has probably exploded by 2,000 to 2,500% in terms of cost since they were there.
Yeah.
But they're just not going to accept that, and so they are going to be angry. So politically, I could see them you know, in the same way that a lot of Republican messaging around consumer spending and checks being the major cause of inflation, I could see this kind of falling within that trap. But it's all a political wash.
Checks,
like, I don't know.
But checks ultimately were massive political benefit to the parties that gave them out,
yes.
right? And you have a lot of people beyond the 43 million who will directly benefit. You have a lot of people who will sort of benefit indirectly, who maybe are helping with those payments, or who are the boyfriend or the girlfriend or the husband or wife of the student loan debt holder, or the parents or grandparents who are, you know, have had to kick in at times to help their kids to be able to shoulder this burden. So to me, I think, you know, nobody knows for sure how the politics of this will play out, but I'm a lot more confident that material politics ultimately are a good thing, that the people who benefit from them, you know, are much more likely to then come out and vote, have a reason to vote, have a reason to feel loyalty to that party. And it's hard for me to imagine people being like single issue voters being pissed off that someone else got a benefit that they didn't directly benefit from, but
it's obviously multifaceted.
Yeah.
No idea. It's
for sure. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.